I'm Kim Bailey, he's Jamie Wadley, and this is Inside Exec. We're up to part 3 of our conversation with Dr. Thomas Krause about core values and safety in organisations and where the two are intertwined. So this week we're going to look at how you recognise when you're a new CEO or new to an organisation, how you recognise the core values of that organisation, and then we move on to the importance of systems and regulatory bodies in terms of safety in the workplace.
If we've got someone who is new to the role of being a CEO or in a position where they can have some effect on the culture, where do they start? They know that what is there is non-existent or not good. Where do they start?
I think they start with understanding how they are influencing the culture now, which CEOs often don't know. Mm-hmm. When a CEO says we need to change our culture, who are they speaking about? Who is the we? That usually means you have to change. And it would be more productive if it were I have to change. Now, so you're a brand new CEO. You just took this job. What do you mean I have to change? Well, I have to be willing and able to recognize how the decisions that I make and the things that I say and the things that I don't say create the culture of this organization.
So we take it a step prior to that. So before this person has taken on the CEO role, how do they find out about the culture in an organization when they're considering taking on the role?
You know, you've probably had the same experience I have of going to a factory and being there for about an hour and feeling like you know the place.
I do a 90-second rule. I do. If I walk into a hotel or anywhere else, it's 90 seconds. I know where everything is and I know what my gut reaction is to in that initial phase.
Yeah, you get it really pretty fast. And later you find out that, well, you were maybe a little bit off, or maybe you missed something, or there's something different. But my experience is I can learn a ton about a factory in an hour of being there. How do they treat me at the gate? Does their procedure of me getting through the gate make sense? Do they show me a stupid videotape that they act like it's stupid, and I think it's stupid? It's not well done. It doesn't convey good information. They don't care about it. It's just something they have to do, and we all know that, and we all suffer through it. I give that as an example, but there are many examples of that kind. Are people friendly? Do they welcome me? Do they look like they're enjoying their job? I mean, all that stuff. You get it very, very quickly. Now, for a new CEO, that's an asset. It's also a hazard, because I'm looking at the whole company and I don't have an opportunity to see the whole company. Where do I see the whole company? I see a team that report to me, and I see maybe a few levels down, and I go visit plants, but it might take quite a while for me to get a sense of the whole organization. That's just how it is. But some CEOs get that stuff really fast, and some go on to the next job without ever having really gotten it.
It's interesting that you mentioned about the video, because a lot of my early career was in the construction industry, and I was the safety training officer for a lot of construction sites. And this was in the late 70s, early 80s into the 90s. And it was not a role it was common for women to be in at that period of time. So often I would have the men would come up from the site to do their obligatory safety induction. And the first thing they would say when they walked through the training room door was, "Oh, it's a girl." It didn't set the tone for it being an important session, important information. And the other thing in those days was that it was the done thing to show the blood and gore videos of this is what will happen. This is, if you don't wear your safety boots, you're going to get a nail through your foot and the blood's going to go everywhere. And none of that had any real effect in terms of them thinking about safety. It gradually lost favour, but not because they were bad videos, but because the message just wasn't getting through.
Yeah.
So how do we, as executives in organisations, how do we get a message through that is our commitment to the organisation and to its core values?
Yeah. Paul O'Neill, the guy that was the head of Alcoa for 20
Yes.
years, he used to, when he would visit, I've consulted with him during his entire tenure at Alcoa and before, actually, when he was at International Paper Company and after when he was doing patient safety. So I got to know him pretty well and see him in action. He would give his telephone number out in a public meeting at the site. And he would say, if you have a problem, if you report something that has safety implications and you don't get action about it, call me. Now, that was a bit of a gimmick, but it was a powerful thing. Yes, indeed. I mean, and people did call him. He didn't get calls every day, and it was not a burden, but it sent a really, I mean, he really meant it. He really meant there are certain things that are unacceptable around here that we're just not going to do. And if one of them is, if you see something hazardous and you report it and everybody ignores it, and that happens in the safety world, that happens. I mean, it's not uncommon at all that something goes unaddressed after it has been reported for a long period of time. It takes somebody getting hurt for them to turn their attention to it and address it. And that's a huge problem. That issue, just, you can't have that. You can't have excellence in safety and have that happen. So he got that across really effectively in that way, and other people do it in different ways.
Tom, do you think the information flow from the coalface is better now than it was traditionally, or is it worse, or do we still suffer the same problems and the same challenges as we would have when you started your career?
People know it's supposed to happen now more than they did then, is my experience. It's not back when I started in the late 70s. If you would have talked about upward communication, many leaders wouldn't know what you were even referring to. I mean, it wasn't in the mix. Certainly in the mix now. Is it better? I don't know. I mean, it's too big. I think you'd have to narrow that down. Is it better in certain industries, in certain countries, certain circumstances? What makes it better? Stuff like that. I think you can get at that.
Yeah, okay.
Does the outside influence happen as much? But what I'm basing it on is that in this country, there was a big trend to have a sign outside buildings, factories, and construction site that said how many days it was since the last accident.
Yeah.
And that seemed to have, because it was giving information not just to the people who were working there, because they saw it every day when they came in, but the general public would have a certain sense of what an organisation was like because of how many days they'd gone without an accident. Don't see it anywhere near as much these days. Are we missing an opportunity for communicating what we are doing in organisations to the broader public by not having that sort of thing?
Well, yes and no is my reaction to that. That particular thing, I think, is counterproductive because it assumes that the behavior of the worker is the issue. So the idea of having that information, it's been 29 days since we've had an event, or it's been 290 days since we've had an event. The idea of that is to increase awareness on the part of the worker. And if I'm more aware, I'll behave more safely and we'll have fewer incidents. That turns out to be wrong. My behavior is not the issue. It's not the primary issue. Now, there was a guy called Heinrich who wrote a book in the 1950s that he was an insurance guy, and he analyzed a whole bunch of insurance claims, and he found that 85% or so of them were related to the behavior of the worker. And that became the holy grail in safety, that worker behavior is the thing that you should address if you want to make it better. And when I started doing this work, that was what I was told. I was told by my first client, we understand the engineering side, but we don't understand the behavioral side. And I was a young behavioral scientist, and I thought, oh man, I understand the behavioral side. I can do with that. That was how I started to become a consultant. But that turns out to be wrong. Heinrich was wrong. It's not the behavior of the worker. It's the design of the system that creates the context in which that behavior occurs. If people don't get that, they do the wrong things. And among senior executives who came up through the system, that idea is still prevalent.
Yeah.
Senior executives, I don't know what percentage. It's not the ones that I see as a subset, and it's a subset that has certain characteristics, so it's not probably representative of the whole, but it's very significant, the number, the frequency with which a senior executive will, not even consciously, but just if you interview them, you say, what's going on? What are you trying to do? What's working? What's not working? How are you approaching this? And so on. They will then speak assuming that the behavior of the worker is the issue that has to be addressed. Now, I don't mean to say that it's not important, the behavior of the worker. Of course, the behavior of the worker matters, but I am absolutely convinced that the way you influence that behavior is not by focusing on the worker's behavior. It's by focusing on what is the system by which this work is getting done, and how does that encourage me to do it safely and protect me, and how does that put me at risk and require that I do things in a certain way in order to avoid being injured.
Are we running the risk because we have introduced so many quality management systems that we rely on those to address the safety issues rather than focusing on the safety itself?
I don't think so. I mean, I think the quality stuff has been generally beneficial to safety. The principles that apply to quality, I think, also apply to safety, and the emphasis on understanding variation and variability. I think that's a benefit to the whole thing.
What about the increase in compliance and regulation across industries? Has that helped or hindered the uptake of a more safe environment?
Yeah. So here's something that goes to that's interesting. In the U.S., patient safety is maybe 20 times as important as worker safety. By that, I mean there are about maybe 20 times as many people get killed in patient safety than in workers. That's a rate, not a raw number, a rate per 1,000 employees. The likelihood of getting killed as a patient in a hospital is about 20 times as high as the likelihood of getting killed working in a factory. One driver of that positive performance on workplace safety is the OSHA regulated method of measurement of incidents. So if you have an incident of this kind, you have to report it, and it goes into this category. And if it's higher, it goes into another category. And if it's fatal, it goes into another category. That regulation, that federal regulation, puts metrics in place for different levels that are common across the whole country. So if I'm a CEO and you're a CEO and we're at a meeting together and I say, what's the recordable rate of injuries, that is the number of injuries per 100 employees that have to be recorded, you know that number for your company. And you can ask me mine, I know. And if you ask me how much variation is there across our facilities in that number, I know that too. But there is no such thing in healthcare safety. It doesn't exist. There's no standard. The way the researchers measure fatalities in healthcare is by sampling the charts of an organization and then extrapolating to a number, because there's no federal regulation in the United States that requires that we keep track of events by this quality or this amount or some method. It doesn't exist.
Why not?
Well, I mean, it's an interesting question. Why not? You would think in a place like the U.S. where we spend a lot of money on healthcare and we have a lot of government activity that is aimed at the common good, and you would think, given all of that we would have a way of measuring fatal events in healthcare, but we do not. Not a standard. In that way, the regimented methodology that's required is missing in the U.S. It's what's missing is of real detriment. I mean, we need that. We need that. We need the government's role in that is obvious and evident, and just hasn't been. They haven't figured out how to do it.
We're going to take a break now in our conversation with Thomas Krause about safety in the workplace. We actually continued to talk for much longer than we expected to, so we've split up this final session into 2 parts. So join us for the actual final part of the conversation next week. For now, I'm Kim Bailey, he's Jamie Wadley. We've been talking with Thomas Krause, and this is Inside Exec.